This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. All right, so the Browns traded Amari Cooper yesterday, and a lot of people are wondering if the Browns are going to have a fire sale. Are these players on the block? And I'm here to tell you right now, spoiler warning to this video, the Browns aren't going to have a fire sale. They're probably going to have a yard sale where they're going to put some of their junk out and see if anybody wants to buy it. But they're not going to sell anything that's like critical to what they want to do going forward, or something that they have deemed as a long-term part of this team, right? So I know people are suggesting that we should trade Myles. They're not going to trade Myles. There's no value you can get from Myles Garrett. You're not going to trade Myles to a contending team for like 2 or 3 late first-round draft picks. That would make absolutely no sense. Trading Myles is just a non-starter. They're not going to trade a lot of the players that some people have suggested trading. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about who's possibly going to be on the trading block and why those players are going to be on the trading block. One thing I do want to touch on before I even get started in this is I have some extra thoughts about the Amari Cooper trade, and this is something that I want to give the Browns front office credit for, because I've been very, very critical of them and their cynical decision making. This was something where I felt like they did right by the player. I think they did right by Amari Cooper in this situation. I bet they had multiple places that they can send Amari Cooper, maybe somewhere that projected to have a better third-round pick at the end of the day than the Buffalo Bills, but I think they sent him to a contending team with a quarterback, and to kind of send the right message to the locker room that we're going to do right by our guys at the end of the day, even if it doesn't work out. And I think that's an important message to send when you're putting them through what you're putting them through right now. So as critical as I've been, I have to point that out, have to give them credit for that. Now let's talk about this fire sale, or as I call it, more of a yard sale. See, what's going on right now is that the Browns are 1-5. And being that the Browns are 1-5, they just don't have use for some of the players that they signed for win now purposes. That doesn't mean that they're going to get rid of Myles Garrett or Denzel Ward or any of these super important players, right? But it does mean some of the pieces that they have just to win right now that are on some expiring deals, they're probably going to look to offload to get some value off of in return. Zadarius Smith is one of those names. He has value to other teams. This is somebody who can bolster any team's pass rush. He's played in a ton of systems throughout his career. We're talking about someone who was top 10 in pass rush win rate in the last season. He was also, before getting traded to the Cleveland Browns and sharing time with Myles Garrett, a 10-sack guy. So a pretty high value target for a lot of teams. And I think the Browns would want to do this because it allows them to play one of their prospects more that they feel good about in Isaiah McGuire and figure out what they have in him before they get into the 2025 draft. I think the only thing that could slow down the Browns from doing this is, one, the defensive line is mission critical to the Browns defense, and they might want to still maintain some level of strong defensive play. That might be worth keeping Zadarius Smith here. I also think the Alex Wright injury might stop them from making this trade, but Zadarius Smith would make sense to be on the block for this team. I don't expect this team to try to strip it down to the parts during the season. I don't think their intention is to make this team awful during the season. I think their intention is to see what you can get rid of while still maintaining a certain quality of play here. Dalvin Tomlinson is another one that could be on the block. I think this one's a bit less likely than a lot of people think it is. The reason people think this is something that could happen is he's another player with value. He's a bit younger than Zadarius Smith, I think 2 years younger than Zadarius Smith, and he's under contract for another year, which would make him valuable to another team. I think Tomlinson is young enough and critical enough that they will be really hesitant to move him. I think they're only going to move him if they feel like they're getting fair value. You also have to remember there's nobody on this roster that can fulfill the responsibilities or assume the responsibilities that Dalvin Tomlinson holds, because he's the only guy who can reasonably be a two-gapper on this defensive line. Again, I don't think the Browns' plan here is to let the defensive line go to absolute shit because they're 1-5. I think they're going to want to maintain a certain quality of play out there because they still need to develop some of these players, right? I know a lot of people are just thinking, oh, well, we can't make the playoffs, so what good does it matter if we are better at defensive line or worse at defensive line? This stuff does matter because you can't develop a defensive lineman, right? If your whole reason for trading Zadarius Smith is to develop Isaiah McGuire, you can't develop him if he's playing with awful interior defensive tackle play. You can't develop your linebackers if they're playing with awful interior defensive tackle play. You're just going to get them used to dysfunction. It's not developing, right? There's a reason why you want to make things get held to a certain standard of play, especially along the line of scrimmage. So yeah, could they trade Zadarius Smith? Yeah, could they trade Dalvin Tomlinson? But I doubt they're going to give those players away. If they get an offer that they can't say no to, then they'll take it, right? I think for Zadarius, you're talking about a third-round pick or third-round pick for Zadarius. That's an offer they can't say no to. For Dalvin, I think you're talking about a third-round pick plus like a fifth-round pick is an offer that would be pretty tough for them to say no to. But outside of that, which I don't anticipate them doing for Dalvin Tomlinson nor Zadarius Smith, I think they're just going to keep those guys, but there is a chance that they can move them. Juan Thornhill is another player that could be on the list. I just don't think this one's likely simply because I don't think the market's going to form. The Browns could stand to trade him. The only thing is that Ronnie Hickman's not really the long-term solution at free safety. He's just not that kind of guy. So you might want to hold on to Juan until you feel like you can develop the guy who's going to be the long-term solution there. He's not that expensive. He's actually kind of cheap. And again, if the market doesn't form, you're going to be giving him away. I don't know if it would be worth it for them, right? Like, again, I don't think the Browns are going to be in the mood to just give guys away because they need to empty out space on this team. That's just not the situation that they're in. I know a lot of people have tried to paint the Browns like they're in that situation, but they're not. Like Amari Cooper, that deal came across their table. A third-round pick was probably more than fair value than what they anticipated getting for Amari. We talked about it on this channel, like probably a fourth round was the most you're going to get for him. You get a third-round pick offer, they make that move there. I think that was like a move they would have made whether this team was 1-5 or this team was like 3-2 or something like that, because that was the price for Amari Cooper, or at least above the price for Amari Cooper. It's going to be a similar situation with everybody else, right? They're not just going to give away Dalvin Tomlinson. They're not just going to give away Zadarius Smith. They're not just going to give away Juan Thornhill. Some younger players who they don't have long-term plans for that they could give away, Jed Wills. Not give away, but trade. Jed Wills is somebody I think's on that list. If somebody wants him and they're willing to give maybe a fourth, I'd be willing to do it. I think James Hudson is solid enough to hold it down at left tackle. Jed really hasn't distinguished himself, unfortunately, from James Hudson. I don't want to extend Jed Wills. I've been on that train where I said that for like a year now, where I'm like, I wouldn't give him an extension. But I doubt the market's going to form for him for those reasons exactly. So I don't think you're going to be able to trade Jed because I don't think there's going to be enough interest there, especially with him being within the last year of his contract, right? He's going to be fifth-year option in 2025. So you do get the 1 year of control with Jed. Or no, you don't get the 1 year. This is his fifth-year option year. So nope, not really thinking that anybody's going to come after Jed. Greg Newsome, I do think, is a big trade piece for the Cleveland Browns. They have the player to spare. They can put in Cam Mitchell if they trade Greg Newsome. They already have two other corners. They have a surplus at this position. They will be fine here if they move on from Greg Newsome. It's not going to be something where you trade a player who's critical to what you want to do, and now you can't develop players because you're just at a horrible part point with this team and its personnel. So I think this is somebody who has a high likelihood of being moved. I know Houston's been listed as a team that's been interested in him. He's a young player. You have control of him until 2025 because he has that 5th-year option, and that's somebody you can extend if you find it necessary. Young, talented corner who could play the outside, still has stuff to learn. He's not the greatest left to right guy, but he's still pretty good. And if you're looking for somebody who can get a day 2 pick reasonably, it's Greg Newsome, right? I think that's the guy that will probably be highest on the block for the Cleveland Browns. And I really think those guys that I mentioned there, it's pretty much the extent of who's going to be on the block. No, I don't think Miles is going to be on the block. I think Miles is absolutely untouchable. There's no trade value worth it for Myles Garrett that exists that a team is going to be realistically willing to offer. JOK, Grant Delpit, Martin Emerson, Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, even Nick Chubb. Like, these are guys that I don't think the Browns are going to be willing to move off of either, because got to remember, the Browns aren't trying to start from scratch. Then they don't need to start from scratch. They have a lot of good pieces in place. The issue with the Cleveland Browns in 2024 is simple. The quarterback play has been so much worse than you anticipated being. That doesn't mean you got to blow the whole thing up. I remember being in a similar situation with this team in 2019. They flip some things around. Boom, you get to 2020. They're much better. And I remember in 2019, people were suggesting that we destroy the whole thing and trade everybody and trade Miles. Wasn't a good idea in 2019. Obviously paid off for him in 2020. 2021, the same thing happens. People want to trade everybody. By 2023, you're 11-win team again. So, no, I don't think that this is something where they should trade a bunch of guys. The turnaround for this team is hopefully within a year or two. So, guys like JOK are going to be very important. Guys like Grant Delpit going to be very important. Guys like Martin Emerson going to be very important. Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, Nick Chubb, Myles Garrett going to be very important. That's the leadership core of your team, and you're going to want to maintain that so that you can add pieces to it in the draft, because those are pieces that are hard to find in the draft, players of that quality. So I don't think this is a fire sale. This is more like a yard sale. The Browns have some junk that they got to get rid of, that they thought they were going to need because they thought they were going to make a trip to the Super Bowl this year. But now that it's obvious that they're probably not making that trip to the Super Bowl, they're offloading some of the junk they got to get to the trip to the Super Bowl. That's it, right? And in some cases, with the Amari Cooper thing, I think a lot of people are overreacting on what it means, because I think they just got a sweetheart deal for Amari Cooper. We're like, hey, we got this 3rd-round pick offer. That's what we've been wanting. Maybe they got multiple 3rd-round picks offers, and they decided that now is the time to pull the trigger. I'm not convinced that if this season had started differently and this team was 3-2 and getting decent quarterback play, that they still would be like, hey, we should probably move on from Amari Cooper if Jerry Jeudy's playing well. So that's kind of where I'm at with that whole thing. I don't think there's a fire sale. I think there's just going to be a yard sale. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.